Pack your shit, Nathan. Your code is company property now, and we don't pay overpaid dinosaurs to hold our shop floor hostage. Spencer Thorne, the newly appointed vice president of operations, slammed his fist onto my mahogany desk, his neck veins bulging under a tailored designer collar. I didn't yell. I didn't raise my voice or throw a fit. I simply picked up my leather briefcase, reached behind the main server rack to unplug my personal blue RSA 4096 hardware token, and dropped my security badge onto his desk. 63 hours later, on Monday morning at precisely 6 a.m., every single 5-axis CNC machine across our $45 million facility flashed a bright crimson error banner, license key expiration code, TXU2384, production halted instantly. Right as an $18.5 million defense contract hit its strict delivery deadline. To understand how a 31-year-old corporate MBA brought a massive precision manufacturing plant to its knees in less than 3 days, you have to go back 18 years to 2008, when Precision Apex Manufacturing was nothing more than a drafty 40,000 square foot industrial warehouse in Ohio with 4 second-hand vertical machining centers and a mountain of debt. My name is Nathan Miller. I am 52 years old, and for nearly 2 decades, I served as chief tooling architect and automation systems engineer at Precision Apex. Back in 2008, when the original founder, Richard Thorne, bought the facility, the factory was struggling with catastrophic calibration drift. We were machining high-spec titanium turbine housings and aerospace structural brackets for commercial clients. The tolerances required were insane, less than 3 microns of variance across multi-axis cuts. Off-the-shelf CAD and CAM software packages simply couldn't handle the thermal expansion curves of raw titanium billets during long high-speed production runs. Scrap rates were sitting at 22%, and the company was bleeding $300,000 a month. Richard Thorne came to me in desperation. At 34 years old, I was working as an independent industrial software consultant. I had spent 6 years writing custom low-level assembly firmware, proprietary mathematical toolpath algorithms, and micro-tolerance dynamic thermal correction loops. I called my proprietary framework the Apex Core Firmware Suite, consisting of over 100,000 lines of handcrafted G-code, low-level microcontroller routines, and dynamic feed rate calibration scripts. When Richard asked me to come aboard full-time to rebuild the factory's digital backbone, I was willing to join, but I made one non-negotiable condition. I was not selling my proprietary software suite to Precision Apex as a work-for-hire asset. I had authored the foundational algorithms years before joining the company. We brought in top intellectual property attorneys and executed a formal, bulletproof licensing and employment master agreement under Title 17 of the United States Code. Under Section 201 by and Section 261, I retained absolute, sole personal copyright and patent rights to the firmware suite, registered under United States Copyright Office Certificate TXU 23849112. Precision Apex was granted a non-exclusive, non-transferable annual operational license for a token fee of $1 per machine per year, contingent upon my active full-time employment as chief tooling architect. The contract contained 2 crucial legal safeguards. First, Clause 14b specified that upon termination of my employment for any reason, the non-exclusive software license would automatically expire 72 hours post-termination unless Precision Apex executed a full corporate IP buyout at a pre-negotiated fair market valuation of $4.5 million. Second, the firmware required an active cryptographic handshake key, a physical RSA 4096 hardware security token that refreshed dynamic encryption keys every 7 days against my private offset server. For 18 years, that setup worked flawlessly. Under my custom firmware, machine setup times dropped by 70%, spindle speed efficiency skyrocketed, and scrap rates plummeted from 22% to a fraction of a tenth of 1%. Precision Apex transformed from a struggling job shop into a premier $45 million annual revenue industrial powerhouse, expanding to 14 state-of-the-art multi-axis CNC machining centers, automated robotic arms, and high-speed laser gantry systems. For 18 years, founder Richard Thorne treated me with the utmost respect. He understood that while the steel frame and physical spindles belonged to Precision Apex, the brain running the entire plant was my intellectual property. But in January of 2026, Richard retired to Florida due to failing health, handing over executive control of the company to his brother, Bradley Thorn, who took over as chief executive officer, and Bradley's 31-year-old son, Spencer Thorn, who was appointed vice president of operations. Spencer came straight out of a boutique private equity firm with a fresh MBA, an expensive watch, and an unbelievable level of arrogance. He had zero experience on a machine shop floor. He couldn't tell the difference between a carbide end mill and a titanium carbide insert, yet he believed he was an industrial visionary destined to streamline operations by cutting overhead. Within his first 3 weeks on the job, Spencer brought in a team of young, aggressive management consultants. They spent days pacing the factory floor with iPads, timing our machinists, complaining about coffee breaks, and staring at line-item budget spreadsheets. Spencer saw my $210,000 annual salary, my performance bonuses, and my independent status on the organizational chart, and immediately tagged me as an overpaid legacy expense that needed to be eliminated. He didn't realize that in precision manufacturing, hardware is just dumb iron without the code driving the toolhead, and he was about to learn that lesson in the most expensive way possible. It was late Thursday afternoon when Spencer Thorn summoned me to the glass-walled executive conference room on the second floor overlooking the shop floor. Sitting at the long mahogany table was CEO Bradley Thorn, sipping bottled water and scrolling through his phone, alongside 2 junior corporate attorneys hired by the new management team. Spencer didn't offer me a seat. He leaned back in his leather chair, tossed a thick 50-page document across the table, and tapped it with a heavy gold pen. "Nathan, we're doing a complete audit of corporate assets and intellectual property before finalizing our new credit line with the bank." Spencer started, his voice dripping with condescending authority. "Our legal team noticed an anomaly in your employment file. It seems there's an outdated 2008 licensing rider claiming you own the custom automation code and micro-tolerance algorithms running our CNC machines. We need to clean up our balance sheet. That document on the table is a full intellectual property assignment and rights transfer. You're going to sign over all patents, copyrights, and source code for the firmware suite to Precision Apex Manufacturing today for a nominal consideration of $1. I didn't reach for the pen. I sat down calmly, opened my notebook, and looked Spencer directly in the eye. "Spencer, that outdated rider is a binding master licensing agreement executed by the founder, Richard Thorn, under Title 17, Section 201 by of the United States Code," I said steadily. "The firmware suite was created prior to my employment as independent proprietary software. Registration TXU2 384-9112 is filed under my personal name with the United States Copyright Office. Precision Apex operates under a non-exclusive license tied directly to my active employment contract. I am not transferring my personal property." Spencer laughed, a sharp, arrogant bark that echoed across the room. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "Listen to me, old man," Spencer sneered, dropping his formal tone completely. "You work for Precision Apex. You sit in our building, you use our electricity, and you get paid a massive salary from our payroll account. Anything uploaded to our CNC machines belongs to this company by default. You don't own jack shit. You've been milking this company for 18 years, hiding behind technical jargon to justify an outrageous compensation package. That ends today." Bradley Thorn finally looked up from his phone, clearing his throat. "Nathan, be reasonable," the CEO said in a flat, pragmatic tone. "Spencer is restructuring our operational expenses. We just secured an $18.5 million defense contract with Boeing and General Electric to manufacture high-precision jet engine turbine housings. We can't have an employee claiming he owns the code running the floor. Sign the assignment papers and we'll keep you on as a senior technician at a revised salary of $95,000 a year." Spencer interjected, grinning maliciously. "That's a 55% pay cut, Nathan. Take it or leave it." I leaned back, closing my notebook. "I'll leave it. My terms are non-negotiable. The licensing agreement stands as written. If you wish to acquire full ownership of the firmware, Section 14B specifies a fair market buyout valuation of $4.5 million. Otherwise, my annual licensing terms remain in effect. Spencer's face turned bright red. He slammed his palm on the glass conference table so hard that his water glass rattled. "You arrogant son of a bitch!" Spencer yelled, standing up and pointing a finger straight at my face. "You think you hold all the cards? You think this company can't run without you? You're an overpaid dinosaur clinging to outdated scripts. Effective right now, you are fired for gross insubordination and breach of duty." Security. 2 armed security guards posted outside the door stepped inside. "Escort Mr. Miller off the premises immediately," Spencer barked at the guards. "He is not allowed to touch any company computers. He is not allowed to speak to any shop staff, and his access badge is revoked." I looked at Bradley Thorne. "Does this mean you are officially terminating my employment contract without cause?" "You heard my vice president," Bradley replied coldly, turning his back to me. "And don't bother asking about your accrued performance bonus or your 12-month severance package. Insubordination forfeits all discretionary compensation. That was $180,000 in earned bonuses and contractually mandated severance that they were attempting to steal right out of my pocket." "Understood," I said quietly. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I stood up, buttoned my suit jacket, and walked calmly out of the executive office under security escort. As we walked down the central aisle of the factory floor, all 45 shop floor machinists stopped working, watching in stunned silence as their chief tooling architect was marched out like a criminal. Walter Brooks, our veteran shop supervisor, who had worked alongside me for 15 years, stepped forward with a wrench in his hand, his eyes wide with concern. "Nathan, what's going on?" "I've been terminated, Walter," I said loudly enough for Spencer, who was watching from the second-floor glass railing, to hear. "Make sure you log all machine cycles carefully." I walked into my office, grabbed my personal leather toolbox, and unplugged my laptop. Then I reached behind the primary server rack, housing the local industrial control node. Plugs into the USB master port was a small, anodized blue aluminum hardware token, my personal RSA 4096 physical cryptographic security dongle. It was my personal property, purchased with my own funds. I unhooked the token, slid it into my pocket, and surrendered my plastic security badge to the guard at the turnstile. As I drove out of the parking lot at 4:30 p.m. on Friday afternoon, I knew 2 things with absolute certainty. First, Spencer Thorne thought he had just saved the company hundreds of thousands of dollars. Second, the cryptographic handshake timer on my server was already counting down. In 72 hours, the license would expire, and without that blue hardware token, the entire factory was about to grind to a permanent, absolute halt. On Friday evening, after returning home, I sat down at my study desk, poured myself a cup of black coffee, and called my legal counsel, Attorney Dean Vance, a veteran federal intellectual property litigator who had drafted my original 2008 master licensing contract. I emailed Attorney Vance digital copies of my termination notice, my original copyright registration certificate TXU 2384912, and the master licensing agreement. 20 minutes later, Attorney Vance called me back on speakerphone. His tone was sharp and triumphant. "Nathan, Spencer Thorne and his father just handed us the ultimate legal hammer," Attorney Vance stated clearly. "By firing you without cause and refusing to pay your contractual severance and accrued performance bonuses, they breached Section 8A of your employment agreement. More importantly, under Section 14B of the Master Licensing Contract and Title 17, Section 501 of the United States Code, your termination instantly triggered a mandatory 72-hour grace period for license revocation. At precisely 6 a.m. on Monday, Precision Apex Manufacturing loses all legal right to execute, or utilize your copyrighted micro-tolerance firmware suite. Any continued operation of those CNC machines using your code after 6 a.m. constitutes willful, illegal federal copyright infringement." "What about their attempt to copy or rewrite the code over the weekend?" I asked. Attorney Vance chuckled. "They can try all they want, but under 35 U.S.C. 261, Statutory damages for willful infringement of registered software patents carry triple multiplier statutory penalties plus emergency federal injunctions. If they run one single spindle using your code after 6:00 a.m. Monday, we can file an emergency ex parte motion in federal district court to freeze their entire operation and seize their shop controllers. What Spencer Thorne didn't understand was the sheer technical complexity of the architecture I had spent 18 years perfecting. In high-precision defense manufacturing, machining titanium and Inconel alloy turbine housings requires sub-micron accuracy. At rotational speeds exceeding 20,000 RPM, friction generates massive thermal expansion across the machine's spindle, bed, and tool holders. A variance of even 4 microns caused by heat distortion will turn an $80,000 raw titanium forging into scrap metal in less than 6 seconds. To solve this, I had written the Apex Core firmware v4, 2 directly into the EEPROM memory chips of all 14 multi-axis CNC machine controllers. My code didn't just read standard static G-code instructions. It ran a continuous real-time telemetry feedback loop, reading 17 thermal sensors across each machine bed and adjusting dynamic coordinate offsets 40 times per second. To protect my proprietary intellectual property from corporate theft or unauthorized reverse engineering, I had built in a multi-layered cryptographic authentication mechanism. Every 7 days, the main industrial control server executed an automated RSA-4096 security handshake. The server pinged the physical blue hardware token I had unplugged on Friday. The token verified the encrypted handshake signature against my private offsite server. If the handshake succeeded, the local server issued a signed digital operational certificate that allowed the CNC microcontrollers to run for another 168 hours. But if the physical token was absent, or if the digital signature failed to validate, the master firmware automatically revoked the execution license. The machine controllers would immediately throw a hard system lock. License expiration error code, TXU2384. When locked out, the CNC machines wouldn't destroy themselves. Instead, they would drop into an ultra-safe, locked-down thermal idle mode. Spindles would retract, coolant pumps would freeze, and the digital display panels would lock out all external inputs. The source code on the local drives was stored as compiled, encrypted binary blobs. Without my private 4096-bit RSA decryption key, reading or modifying the code was mathematically impossible. It would take a supercomputer 300,000 years to brute force the encryption. Unaware of the technical tsunami heading his way, Spencer Thorne spent Saturday morning flexing his authority. Walter Brooks, our shop supervisor, texted me privately from the shop floor. Spencer had forced the entire second-shift machining crew to work mandatory 24-hour weekend overtime to meet the upcoming $18.5 million Boeing delivery deadline. Spencer had even posted a photo on LinkedIn on Saturday afternoon, showing himself standing in front of machine number 7, holding a champagne glass with the caption, "Cutting out legacy dead weight and driving high-performance efficiency. Out with the old overpaid dinosaurs, in with 24/7 modern execution, leadership, manufacturing excellence, cost reduction." On Sunday afternoon, Spencer tried to have his junior IT technicians back up the shop server and extract the raw G-code files to create a duplicate repository. Walter reported that the IT crew spent 8 hours trying to access the root directory of the CNC network, only to hit a brick wall. Every attempt to bypass the encrypted partition resulted in an automated access denied warning. By Sunday night at midnight, the 72-hour legal grace period was down to 6 hours. I sat in my living room, drinking tea, while Attorney Vance finalized our federal copyright infringement complaint and emergency injunction papers. The trap was set. Spencer Thorne had walked right into a technical and legal fortress of his own making, and in just a few short hours, the sun would rise on Monday morning, and the entire $45 million factory would come face to face with the reality of what happens when you fire the man who owns the brain of your machines. Monday morning, 6 a.m. On the factory floor of Precision Apex Manufacturing, 45 machinists and assembly technicians clocked in for the morning shift. Over 50 raw titanium alloy billets, valued at over $3,000 each, were loaded into the hydraulic chucks of the 14 5-axis CNC machining centers. At 6:01 a.m., shop supervisor Walter Brooks pushed the master cycle start button on machine number 1. Instead of the familiar low hum of high-speed spindle mows and coolant spray, a piercing high-pitched warning alarm chimed through the factory speaker system. The main 15-inch industrial display monitor flashed from cool blue to a blinding solid crimson backlight. Large, bold white lettering filled the screen. Critical Aaron Air 100K, RSA 496, Hardware Ekic Handshake failed. License key TXU2384 expired. Property microcolligurance Fenver access revoked by. Proprietor Nathan Miller. All executions halted simultaneously across the entire 40,000 square foot shop floor. Machine 2 through Machine 14 chimed in unison. All 14 multi-axis CNC mills, 2 automated robotic loading arms, and 3 laser gantry systems locked down into emergency thermal idle. Walter Brooks didn't panic. He simply stepped back, folded his arms, and smiled. Within minutes, Spencer Thorne came sprinting down the metal staircase from the executive suite, holding a mug of coffee that spilled over his pristine white shirt. "What the hell is going on?" Spencer shrieked, shoving past a machinist to stare at the flashing red monitor on machine 1. "Why are the machines down? Override it. Push the manual start." Walter shook his head. "Can't do it, Spencer. The system is hard-locked at the microcontroller level. The firmware license expired at 6 a.m. sharp. That's impossible. It's just software," Spencer screamed. He grabbed the emergency manual override key, inserted it into the control panel, and turned it. He tried to upload a raw, uncalibrated legacy G-code file from an old flash drive into machine 3. The machine's spindle spun up with a violent grinding screech. Without my custom thermal correction algorithms running 40 times per second, the tool head plunged into a $3,000 titanium billet at the wrong thermal offset. Within 4 seconds, intense friction overheated the carbide cutter, snapping the $80,000 spindle head clean off and turning the titanium forging into scrap. Smoke billowed from the enclosure as emergency fire suppression sprinklers misted the bay. "Stop! Shut it down," Spencer shrieked, pale as a sheet. In less than 2 minutes of arrogant manual tampering, he had just caused $160,000 in catastrophic hardware damage. Spencer turned furiously to his lead IT technician. "Wipe the machines, erase his software, and load standard generic G-code." The IT technician stared at Spencer like he was insane. "Mr. Thorne, if we wipe the EEPROM controllers without Mr. Miller's proprietary calibration keys, we lose all factory access alignment. These zero-point offsets took 18 years to tune. Wiping them will turn this $45 million plant into $45 million of useless scrap iron." At 8:30 a.m., catastrophe turned into complete panic. A black SUV pulled up to the front entrance. Out stepped senior audit representatives from Boeing and General Electric Defense Division, arriving for a scheduled on-site quality inspection to verify the first production run of turbine housings under their $18.5 million contract. When the lead auditor walked onto the shop floor and saw $14 million machines standing completely dead, flashing crimson federal copyright expiration notices, and one machine bay smelling of burnt spindle oil, his face turned to stone. "Mr. Thorne," the lead auditor said, looking down at Spencer with absolute contempt, "your contract under Section 9 explicitly mandates continuous production readiness. You are currently in material breach of supply readiness. Starting today at noon, Precision Apex is subject to liquidated damages of $250,000 per day of delay. If production is not fully restored within 48 hours, our legal counsel will formally cancel the $18.5 million contract and sue Precision Apex for default." Spencer felt his world collapsing around him. A $250,000 daily penalty would wipe out the company's operating cash flow in less than 5 days. Losing the Boeing contract meant immediate bank loan default and corporate bankruptcy. Desperate, Spencer ran back upstairs to his office. Between 9 a.m. and 11:30 a.m., my phone began ringing incessantly. 103 missed calls flooded my screen. 42 text messages from Spencer Thorne devolved from arrogant demands to wild threats, and finally to outright begging, "Nathan, pick up the phone. This is illegal. You are sabotaging company property. We will sue you for millions. Nathan, please call me back. Name your price to come fix the bug." I didn't answer a single call. I sat quietly in Attorney Dean Vance's high-rise office downtown, enjoying a cold glass of sparkling water while watching the email inbox fill up. At 11:45 a.m., Attorney Vance sent a formal response to CEO Bradley Thorne, copying the board of directors, Boeing's legal counsel, and the company's primary lender. The letter contained a formal cease and desist order, a notice of willful federal copyright infringement under 17 U.S.C. paragraph 501, and a copy of my original 2008 master licensing contract. Attorney Vance wrote, "Be advised that Precision Apex Manufacturing is currently operating in willful violation of federal copyright law. Any attempt to bypass, modify, or execute Mr. Nathan Miller's copyrighted software suite, TXU2 384912, will result in an immediate federal injunction freeze of all corporate accounts. If Precision Apex wishes to resume factory operations, Mr. Miller demands an emergency meeting with the full board of directors today at 2 p.m. Spencer Thorne thought he was playing simple office politics. He was about to learn what happens when corporate arrogance runs headfirst into federal law. At 2 p.m. on Monday afternoon, I walked into the main boardroom at Precision Apex Manufacturing, accompanied by Attorney Dean Vance. Seated around the large conference table were the 3 independent members of the board of directors, representatives from our primary lender, Boeing's corporate counsel, CEO Bradley Thorne, and a visibly sweating Spencer Thorne, whose eyes were bloodshot and whose tie was undone. Before I could even take a seat, Spencer jumped up, pointing a trembling finger across the table. "Board members, this man is committing corporate extortion," Spencer shouted, his voice cracking with desperation. "He intentionally sabotaged our production floor. He holds a backdoor kill switch to company machinery. I demand we have the police arrest him right now for industrial sabotage." The chairman of the board, a stoic 68-year-old manufacturing veteran named George Harrison, slammed his heavy wooden gavel onto the table. "Sit down and shut your mouth, Spencer." Chairman Harrison barked, his eyes blazing with fury. "You have done enough damage to this company in 3 weeks to last a lifetime." Attorney Vance calmly opened his leather briefcase, pulled out 5 bound legal dossiers, and distributed them to the board members and bank representatives. "Ladies and gentlemen," Attorney Vance began in a calm, authoritative voice, "Mr. Nathan Miller did not sabotage anything. What you are witnessing on the shop floor is the legal expiration of a non-exclusive software license under Title 17, Section 201 by, and Title 35, Section 261 of the United States Code. Mr. Miller is the sole personal author and copyright holder of the Apex Core firmware suite under registration TXU2 384912. 3 days ago, Vice President Spencer Thorne unlawfully terminated Mr. Miller without cause, refused to pay his earned bonuses, and attempted to coerce him into signing over his personal property for $1. Attorney Vance tapped the document on the table. Under Section 14B of the Master Licensing Agreement signed in 2008 by founder Richard Thorne, Mr. Miller's termination triggered an automatic license expiration. Continued operation of the plant without a valid license constitutes willful federal copyright infringement. Every hour, the shop remains locked. Liquidated damages accrue at $250,000 per day. Chairman Harrison turned to CEO Bradley Thorne, his voice dripping with disgust. "Bradley, did you allow your son to fire our chief tooling architect without reviewing his employment and licensing contracts?" Bradley Thorne looked down at his hands, unable to answer. "We have reviewed the figures," Chairman Harrison said, turning to me with deep respect. "Mr. Miller, on behalf of the Board of Directors and Precision Apex Manufacturing, I apologize unreservedly for the reckless, amateurish actions of our former management team. How do we resolve this today so production can restart?" I leaned forward, laying out my 4 strict, non-negotiable settlement conditions. "First," I said clearly, Precision Apex will execute an immediate full corporate IP buyout of the Apex Core firmware suite under Clause 14B for the pre-negotiated fair market valuation of $4.5 million. Second, Precision Apex will immediately pay my accrued performance bonus and 12-month severance compensation totaling $180,000, bringing the total wired settlement to $4,680,000. I looked directly at Spencer Thorne, who paled. Third, I continued, Spencer Thorne and CEO Bradley Thorne must be immediately removed from all executive operational roles for gross fiduciary negligence and breach of corporate duty. Fourth, Precision Apex will execute a full, irrevocable legal release and indemnification agreement, holding me harmless against any past, present, or future operational claims. Spencer leapt out of his chair. $4.68 million? Are you insane? Board members, you can't agree to this. That's corporate theft. Chairman Harrison didn't hesitate for a single second. He looked around the table at the other board members. All three raised their hands in unanimous agreement. Motion carried, Chairman Harrison declared. The settlement is approved in full. Chairman Harrison turned to the two security guards standing at the boardroom door. The very same guards Spencer had used to march me out on Friday. Escort Spencer Thorne and Bradley Thorne off the premises immediately. Chairman Harrison ordered sternly. Revoke their access credentials, lock them out of the corporate network, and clear their desks. Spencer gasped, trying to protest as the guards grabbed him by both arms and marched him out of the boardroom. His stock options were stripped, his executive career was ruined, and he left the company in absolute disgrace. At 3:45 p.m., my phone buzzed with a notification from my bank. A wire transfer confirmation popped up on my screen. $4,680,000.00, cleared and averable immediately. With the contract signed and funds secured, I walked back down to the shop floor alongside Walter Brooks. I entered the main server bay, pulled the blue RSA 4096 hardware token from my pocket, and inserted it into the master server console. I entered my master administrative encryption key and executed the cryptographic handshake ping. Instantly, across all 14 multi-axis CNC machining centers, the crimson error banners vanished. The bright green operational status lights illuminated in a brilliant wave down the main aisle. Spindles hummed back to life, coolant jets burst into action, and robotic arms resumed their high-speed precision movement. The entire shop floor erupted into cheers and applause. That evening, I officially retired from Precision Apex Manufacturing as an employee. 2 weeks later, I established my own independent automation consulting firm. Today, Precision Apex pays me a retainer fee of $350 an hour whenever they need system updates or technical consultation. Looking back, Spencer Thorne thought he could use arrogance, intimidation, and corporate power to steal 18 years of hard-crafted intellectual property. But in the end, he learned the ultimate lesson of the modern workplace. Hardware may build the body of a business, but code and integrity are its true soul. And when you try to steal from the person who built the foundation, your entire empire will crumble around you.